Here it is. Many, many moons ago, when I was a kid, we used a lot of language that we understand today as not being acceptable language. Biggest example of this being calling things gay if we didn't like them or if they weren't masculine enough for them. And of course, that continued on to even using the F slur. Now, obviously, many of us who used to use that kind of language now understand today that that kind of language is not good and bad, which is the opposite of good. I don't know if you guys knew that, but bad is the opposite of good. I think that's an important thing to remember. I don't think that we should be using that kind of language, period. Even if you are gay, I don't think that that's the kind of word that you should be saying. If we do use that term, even casually, with other gay people, then people who are not a part of that community will start to see people using that word and it will normalize the usage of that word for them. So, a kind of example of this is I worked with this girl who was dating a black guy, and she would use a certain word that I, as a white person, would never say. And she liked to use that word from time to time. Now, I think it's important to note that she is a white person. Uh, but whenever someone would call her out for using that word, she would say, "Oh, no, no, it's okay. My boyfriend's black. I'm allowed to use that word. If he's okay with you joking around and saying that kind of stuff around him, that's one thing. But when you're saying something like that in a public setting, people around you might not understand the context of that. They would just assume that she's incredibly racist. A lot of times when you say these things, outside observers might not understand the full context of it. That, first of all, they could assume bad things about you, and secondly, this could normalize usage of those particular words. In my experience, the kinds of people who will look for those justifications to say those words want to say those words anyway. So if you give them any kind of justification, they will take it and they will start using that kind of language. And then when you try to call them out on it, they'll kind of come back at you with, well, I heard gay people using the F slur, so, it's okay if I use it too. Someone uses it jokingly because one of their close friends is gay, and then someone hears them using it knowing that they aren't gay. That just kind of normalizes the usage of that word. I think that words like that should not be normalized, and I think that we do need to draw a hard line on it and just say, no, nobody can use that word ever. Now, there definitely are cases of words being reappropriated by the communities that they're meant to offend, and that's obviously a fine thing if the community as a whole is moving forward with that and taking away the power from that word, that's fine. But I think another thing to keep in note is the cases where something like that has been very successful, oftentimes the actual pronunciation of the word is changed. For example, if I say someone said a word with a hard R, I think most of you would immediately know the word that that person said. And obviously, saying a word like that versus saying the pronunciation differently and by, someone who's actually part of that community has a very different meaning to it. I think that that can be a very slippery slope where someone sees people using the word, even if the pronunciation is changed, even in a different context. People will see other people using that word and then think that it's okay for them to use it. Ultimately, the problem that I personally have with the F slur, other than, just that it's an offensive term, is it's also a matter of remembering the historical context of this word. Now, as a general rule, any word that has been yelled at someone as they've been beaten to death is a word that I'm going to keep out of my vocabulary. Thirdly, I think it's important to remember that there are some people in the community who might not be okay with using that kind of language. Again, even if you and your friends joke around and throw around the F slur in a, group of all gay people, there might be people within that group that are still not comfortable with that word. But when you start normalizing it for one person, then that can cascade out and they use it around their friends and then their friends start using it and then their friends start using it. And that can really ripple out and have a really negative impact in a lot of ways. And, I think it's important to remember, like, butterfly effect. Things can ripple out in an uncontrollable way. And so even if we're using, this negative word in a joking way, that can still have really negative impacts on the world. Moral of the story, we shouldn't use that word, no matter who you are. People who want to use that kind of hateful language are going to look for any excuse to use it. And so if they see something like that and can use that as justification for using that language, then they will. The other thing that I think can be very harmful about this is that things like this can oftentimes perpetuate a lot of negative stereotypes. And I think the most common example of this is where you see comedians, that are joking about their own heritage or culture, but then people will start saying those things and they'll be like, "Oh no, it's okay. I'm just quoting this comedian and, I'm just saying this thing that someone else already said and it's okay for him to say it, because he's part of that group or whatever. So, I'm just quoting him and it's okay for him to say it." And I don't think comedians should be doing those kinds of sets because they are perpetuating these negative stereotypes. And again, it normalizes it for people. And these people are going to look for any kind of excuse to, say these negative things. If the people are already, bigoted and hateful and racist and whatever, then they're actively looking for excuses to justify that. We need to not give them any kind of justification for that. Moral of the story is nobody should be using that kind of language. And nobody should be perpetuating negative stereotypes, even if they're part of that group, because then that normalizes it for people who want to say these things in a hateful way and who want to, be openly racist, and that gives them the justification. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the subject in the comments. So go ahead, leave a comment. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I do new videos every Monday and Thursday, so if you hit the bell, you'll get notified of when a new video comes out. Um, okay, bye.